you're chatting, Genevieve. Okay, it's 1 p.m. Hello, everybody out there in Facebook land and in the Zoom room with us. Welcome. My name is Liz Crocker, and I'm a learning program developer here at the, well, not here in my home today, but at the Royal BC Museum. While the museum's closed, we're doing these series of online learning programs. And today is our second Educator webinar program. So first of all, I want to say, because I'm at home, we're all working from home, that I want to acknowledge that my home is actually in the Wasanich speaking people's territory, and also the Lekwungen speaking people's territory. And so we are very grateful to be working from home and to be doing these programs. And today the format is, because we're in a webinar, we can't see and hear you, but you can see and hear us. So we're looking for interaction with you in the chat window, the Q&A. If you have any particular questions about using archival resources, please let us know, and we'll try to sort of gear the workshop to that, to the presentation to that. Yeah, there's the chat window and also the Q&A where you can put questions directly to us. So we've got about 45 minutes, and I'm going to turn it over to Genevieve Weber here in a minute. She's an archivist with the Royal BC Museum. But I also wanted to say the context for this kind of program is the historical thinking concepts. So if you're not a teacher, if you're a parent teaching at home, you might not be familiar with them. And they were developed several years ago now, and they are all throughout the BC school curriculum, mostly through the social studies curriculum, and also in other provinces in Canada. And so you'll see in some of the resources that we refer you to today in the learning portal, you might see reference to historical thinking, and I might share a link or two in there. And so if you're not familiar with them, I encourage you to look at them. This is going to be very, very general, but essentially the historical thinking concepts are about sort of unveiling the process of history. And so if you're around my age or even younger, you might have been taught history very differently, where you're learning dates and facts and events. And teaching with historical thinking concepts is more about looking at how we not create history, but how we create narratives about history, how we decide historical significance, how we interpret those things, what kind of primary source, what do we use for evidence to declare something is significant. So there's all kinds of resources related to that. It really makes history very active and alive, and it's much more interesting for students. So you'll see that some of the resources we're referring to today really fit nicely with historical thinking concepts. Okay, I'm going to stop and turn it over to Genevieve. What do you want to begin with, Genevieve? Where do we start?
There's so much to talk about. I'll start by just explaining a little bit about who I am and what I do. So thank you, Liz. My name is Genevieve Weber, and I'm an archivist at the BC Archives. We're the provincial repository for the government of BC, and we represent records from across the province. The BC Archives is part of the Royal BC Museum, which, as Liz mentioned, is on Lekwungen speaking territory, and I am here at my home in Saanich, which is on right around the border of the traditional territory of the Wasanich and the Lekwungen speaking people. We, at the BC Archives, we have both government and non-government records. So government records come in from ministries across the province. And if you think about all the things that the provincial government is involved in, that's a lot of different types of records, touching on really everything that happens in BC in some way. Government records often sound dry, but some of them are really interesting. I think people have stereotypes about what types of records are kept by the government, but some of them are really great. And I'm going to show you some examples of some fun stuff. We also take in what non-government records, what we call private records. That's anything that is created by an individual, a person, a company, an organization, and is provincial in significance. So we're looking for things that really tell the story of the people, the places, and the industry of the province as a whole. I mentioned before that I would really love to hear from people who are participating today, and I saw one comment about something that people are interested in, and thanks Liz, put up a post there from something from the Learning Portal, which I'll talk about the Learning Portal as well today. There's definitely a lot of really interesting information about the Chinese-Canadian experience in BC, so that's what somebody was asking about just now. And there was actually some really interesting projects that happened in partnership with the BC Archives in recent years to highlight some of those records, so I can show you some examples of that today. So as Liz said, the way that we learned history as kids wasn't always really exciting. There were things that made me really interested in history as a kid. And one of them, something that I really liked, was seeing what I now know are primary source material, but I didn't think of it in that term at the time. I thought about the fact that my family had lots of interesting things. I'm sitting here at my desk, and this wasn't planned, but I showed this in another webinar that I did, but something like this, which is a really old signature book of an ancestor of mine where she would go around and collect signatures. These types of primary source materials I found really interesting and exciting. But when I was at school, we didn't access something like that. We didn't access something that was created as an original item. You know, what we were looking at was books where people were retelling stories and distilling information. So why are primary sources so important? Every book that's written, and apologies if this is all things you know, but it's a good reminder. Every book that's written, somebody had to interpret primary sources to come up to the conclusions that they came up with. And I think in the past, we didn't give students of any age enough credit that they could do that themselves. So accessing the records in the archives, it's amazing what kids will come up with, what students will come up with when they're looking at primary source material. So I'll show you the database in a minute, but a couple, the types of records that we collect at the BC Archives come in all formats. So the formats that we have are textual. Textual records is anything written down. So that could be a letter or a government document, or it could be a journal, anything that's written, and it could be written by hand or typed into a computer and printed or saved on a disk. All of those are considered textual records. We also have photographic records. So we have about, I'll probably get the number wrong, but maybe about 180,000 digitized photographs that are easily accessible online, but we have over 5 million in total. So there's a lot of records that aren't digitized, and I'll talk about how to access those ones as well. But there's lots online that you can look at and use and access. We also have audiovisual records. So that's sound recordings, things that you listen to. That could be radio shows or oral histories. And we also have moving picture images. So anything that's filmed, whether that's on a reel-to-reel tape or on a VHS or DVD. So things that are moving in front of you. We have cartographic records. Those are one of my favorite types of records. A cartographic record is an architectural drawing, a map, or a plan. And those can give us so much great information about a place. And I think I'm forgetting something. In addition to those are all primary source materials, and we also have secondary source materials that complement what we have. So we have newspaper articles, we can access newspapers on site, and we have a library collection, and we have paintings, drawings, and prints. I think I saw a question from Dave Obie. Genealogist, when will the next year of death registrations be released? I'm sorry, Dave, I don't have an answer for that. For those of you interested in family history, that's always the exciting thing that people are waiting for, is the next release of the vital events records. The Vital Statistics Agency is in control of when those records come to us, so it's really up to them. And I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that with the situation as it is right now, that might be going a little bit slower, but I don't know. We'll let you know, I promise. We'll make a big announcement as soon as they come in. So family history is something that a lot of people are interested in, particularly when working with youth. people, it's a great way to get students interested in doing history research. So we will talk a little bit about that. And also just generally a more broader than that community research. So looking into how to research the place that, that children and youth are from is a great way to get them interested in history. So I'm going to share my screen and show a few things. And one thing, Liz, we didn't test out trying a video, but I guess we could try that.
We can definitely try that. And you just want to click a couple of boxes at the bottom of the screen. I can talk you through.
Okay, I'll let you know when we get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've just been popping up links while you've been talking, Genevieve.
Okay. So this is the BC Archives website. It's a part of the Royal BC Museum's website. And there's some great information on this page about the BC Archives, about what you can access, how you can visit us. Of course, right now we're not on site at the moment, but we'll be seeing how that will be happening as we get back. But for the moment, there's lots of ways that you can access material online. This was the little video I wanted to show, Liz, so maybe we can do that now.
Oh, within the page there, that should be fine.
Or I can go
if
to
you can make it larger.
I can go up to YouTube if you would prefer me to do it that way.
I think either is fine. You just want to try to make it bigger using, you should have that little option in the corner to make it larger. Yeah.
I think I have to press play first though. Should I start?
Yes, I'll let you know if we're not hearing anything. Go ahead. I'm not hearing any sound. Is there sound yet? No.
Okay, we should have tested that before.
Yep. I think it's when you first go to share your screen, you have the option. If you want to stop sharing, bear with us, audience.
Sorry.
Okay, no, that's all right. Okay, you're apologizing. Okay, yeah. Okay, so go to share your screen again. And before you click on what you want to click on underneath, check off those little boxes for sound. There we go. Now that should work. Okay, now give it a go.
Welcome to the BC Archives. We're located in beautiful Victoria, right beside the Royal BC Museum. Our job is to acquire, preserve, and share the documentary heritage of the province. Visit us to explore not just the history, but the stories of British Columbia. Whether you're a seasoned genealogist or a student researching a project, we have the resources and staff to point you in the right direction. We have millions of records for you to explore, including 180,000 maps and architectural records, 5 million photographs, 100,000 boxes of textual records, 13,000 audio recordings, 5,300 video and film titles, 72,000 publications, and 10,000 drawings, paintings, and prints. Before you arrive, visit our website to learn more about the archives and search for records and publications through our online catalogs. Make sure to take note of the records you are interested in before you arrive. Once you know what you'd like to see, simply register online for your research pass and pick it up in person. When you get here, we offer free access to the reference room. Here you can get expert help from archivists and access technicians. You can access records, view films and photographs, examine maps, listen to interviews and broadcasts, order copies of records, and much more. We also host fun and educational events and tours throughout the year. Check our online calendar to see what's coming up. We're excited to welcome you to the BC Archives and look forward to helping you discover the stories of BC.
Okay.
That is a nice general overview. Thanks for that, Genevieve.
Yeah, so it gives you a bit of an idea of who we are and what we do. And also on this page, there's other information that you can read about various things that we do, what we have, and then we'll get into searching in just a moment. But before we do that, I wanted to mention that one thing that I hear a lot from educators is, what are we allowed to use? So anything that you do find digitized online you can use for personal and research purposes. So you can, if you see something online, you're welcome to use that. What we don't want is people publishing books without getting licensing permissions from us. But anything that's online, please do use that. Make sure you use that and share that and show it to your students. These are things that we want people looking at and using and accessing, and that's why we try to make as much accessible and available as possible. So there's a few ways to get to finding records and information. And I'm going to give you a very brief overview of our databases, but then I'm going to show you some of the other ways that you can find records from the archives through the museum website, through the learning portal, through our online exhibitions, and then how that can link back to the archives. And if I miss any step along the way, please send me questions, and Liz, feel free to interrupt me because I can't see the questions right now as I've got my screen on here.
Yep, no problem. I suspect you're probably going to mention a couple of resources that are related to Chinese Canadian history, since we've already had a question about that.
Definitely.
And then I meant to say, Genevieve, we'll keep going with you till about 1:30, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Perfect. That sounds great. One thing I always find hard when I'm sharing my screen is that every time I go to click on a new link at the top, I get blocked by my share screen thing. So give me one moment, please. I apologize.
No worries.
I think it's...
I wonder if you have to stop sharing and go back. Unless you can
I've got
grab it there. You got it?
No, that's not the one I was looking for. Sorry, folks. You know what? Oh, here we go. So people always ask about genealogy. I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the genealogy database first, before I get into our main database. The genealogy database, so we have 3 databases altogether. One for our main collections with all of those things that I mentioned before, the photographs, descriptions of cartographic maps, cartographic records, textual records, all of that information. The genealogy database is where the vital events records are, which is what Dave was asking about on Facebook. So the genealogy database is where people usually start when they're first starting out researching their family history. So the database has a lot of fields, and my recommendation with this one is start with as little information as possible and then add more if you need to. The things that you'll find in here are registrations of births, marriages, and deaths, along with some baptismal records, but those I want to make it very clear that there's not as many. It's not comprehensive because that was a voluntary project that some churches took part in. The one tip, if you don't remember anything else, my one tip is always put the first name in asterisks. That way it'll search for it in both the first name and the last name position. Or sorry, the first name and the middle name. A lot of people went by their middle name. So if you don't put the stars around it and it was actually the person's middle name, then it won't show up in a search result. I'm going to leave all of these event types checked. So I'm searching for every single event type. The name that I've put in is my great-grandmother's. And hopefully this works. Oh, why is it? Oh, it says it's waiting. I guess I just need to be patient. It's hard to be patient when I know people are watching. While we're waiting, it will, if there's multiple results, it'll come up with a long list of all of the results. So here we go. If there had been more than one result, you would have seen it listed vertically. This result gives me a high-level description of what I found. I found a marriage. I'm going to try and change my, there we go. Now you should be able to see my cursor a bit better. So it's a marriage registration. I have the registration number. I also know that it's found on a BC Archives microfilm reel. So if you were to come into the reference room, you'd be able to look at this on microfilm. I know that it happened in 1924, and here are the names. So my great-grandmother was called Genevieve, but her first name was actually Alice. So if I had just put in Genevieve without the stars around it, it wouldn't have shown up. But the great thing about this one is there is a JPEG, which means that I can open it up and look at the registration on the screen. I can print it and keep this for myself. There's some really fun information in here that I really like to look at. The great thing, marriage registrations are usually relatively accurate because they're filled out usually by the people getting married. So they tend to know their own name and their occupation, which is great. So this is, I know that my great-grandfather was a truck driver. It says where he was born, it says the name of his father and where he was born, the name of his mother and where she was born. And that was her signature album that I had held up before, Sylvia Wattier. And then down here, I know the bride's name, my great-grandmother, that she was a waitress. I actually know more than what it says here. I know that she was a waitress at the Royal Colwood Golf Club, which is kind of fun. And again, I've got lots of other names here. So I started out with one name. I now have 6 relatives' names because I have all of the names of the parents as well, which is great fun. Marriage registrations are wonderful if you can find those. So that's a really basic, quick intro to the genealogy database. That can be a lot of fun for working with students to connect students to ancestors or community members. So of course we only have vital events records that took place in BC, so the event had to have happened here, but I've known teachers who have used the vital events records to focus on a person or a family and to look in and to learn about researching families that came from here. So even if it's not the student's family, it could be another family member. And we have on the learning portal, we have an example of that, of family research that got in a lot more in depth than just looking at genealogy material. And I think we'll show that in just a minute. But I want to show you our other database before we do that. So this is our main database. You can get there from the BC Archives website. If you do a Google search for BC Archive search, you can also find this pretty easily. If you do use this database, I recommend that you watch this little video clip. I don't think we'll watch it right now, but it's a really quick intro to with some great tips and tricks on using this database because it is a little bit quirky at times. But this is what it looks like when you first look. You can do a quick search. If you don't know what you want to look for, but you have a general subject area that you're interested in, you can click on subjects and you can search subject terms. Keep in mind that these subject terms have to be added by a staff member. So it will give you some of the records, but not necessarily all of them, but it's a great way to start to learn about the types of records that we have. So you can see here, we've even got some that are specifically linked to the Kootenay district, which I think is what we were looking for. Was it Kootenay? I think that
it was Fernie. Fernie's, right. Is that technically Kootenay's?
I believe so. So this has linked us to, this is actually a great example because it's linked us to a couple of different types of records. So when you look here, this will give you an idea of some of the places where you might find records. Again, it's not comprehensive, but this is a good starting point. So this has linked us to 2 photographs. And you can open those up, get a bigger image of the photograph. My work computer doesn't let me expand the photo even more, but on most people's personal computers, you can actually open up the photograph even larger. And then when you scroll down, it'll give you some more information about what this record is. So it's got a title, which was the title given by the person who took the photograph. Presumably it was written on the back of the photograph. It was taken in 1969. We can link to who created this photograph. So we could, if I clicked on this, which I'm not going to do now because I don't want to get too far down this route, but you can click on that and that will give you more information about where the photograph came from. Sometimes you'll see a description of a photograph without a thumbnail, and that means that we don't have a digitized copy of it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get one. It means that we don't have one now. But if you write in and ask us for something, we may be able to get a copy of that. these records, you can see that these descriptions, the codes start with the letters GR. That means that these are government records. And you can read down here, that's where they came from. So this is something from the Department of Mines. And this one is from the Gold Commissioner. And at this very high level, you can see what years this is from. So these are records relating to gold mining from the 1860s, 1870s, 1880s. And this will be a description of the record. We don't, a lot of government records we don't have digitized, but we have descriptions online. And you can read a little bit about it. So you can read that this is textual records. We also have it on microfilm, which means that it is actually relatively easy to scan. Microfilm records, if you are able to come into the archives, you can scan them for free. But if you're somewhere further away, you can order copies. You can order scanned copies of things. It says that the series consists of a manual of conveyance for the Wild Horse Creek district created by the Kootenay Gold Commissioner between 1865 and 1972. I think that might be a mistake. I think it was supposed to be 1872. Fix that. So these types of records, these types of textual records often have a lot of information about the people who were working in that area at the time. And I believe that these were probably tagged the way they were with that subject heading because they were part of the project that I was mentioning that identified records around the Chinese experience in BC. That's a great way to start, just getting a feel for what kinds of records we might have. But you can also do a search using keywords in the search terms here. You can filter it down. One of the things that I wanted to make sure to show you was you can filter it down by record type by clicking under General Material Designation. So this is where you can choose, if you only are interested in sound recordings, you can click on sound recording. If you're only interested in photographs, that's under graphic material. That'll bring up photographs and paintings, drawings, and prints. So you can narrow down your search to find different things. I wanted to show you an example of, I think it's this one here. There we go, of a digitized textual record. So sometimes we do have records that have been digitized. This is a really great series. If you're interested, I would recommend if you put down the GR-0461, you'll be able to come back and search for this if you find this interesting. These are Teachers Bureau records, and they contain a lot of really interesting information about communities in BC in the 1920s. These were records of rural schools. Teachers would have to fill in these reports and send them in the 20s describing the school, but they also described the population, what types of work people did in that area. And I've used this with different classrooms, and I've known educators who have used them to look up their community to find out what the community was like in the 20s, and to encourage students to think about 100 years ago and what it would have been like if they were going to school in that town or village 100 years ago. So if anybody has a particular town that they want me to look up, let me know now. If you search over here under quick search, you can put in the name. In the meantime, I'm from Langford, so I always use Langford as an example. I'm gonna click Langford there, and a few different ones came up. I'm going to make this nice and big. So you can see the type of information that they use. They talk about how you can get there. So there was a stagecoach service.
Genevieve, can you search for Fernie?
Of course, yeah, I'll search for Fernie.
After you had a little look here.
This one, this is one of my favorite ones because all of the ones for Langford and Colwood list poultry raising as the chief industry. This one also listed resort. And I really like that because my grandfather used to talk about how when he was a kid in the 30s, he had a milk route and a newspaper route. And his the number of people that he delivered to would triple in the summer because of Langford Lake and Glen Lake and all of the people coming out from Victoria who had summer homes on those lakes, which I always think is really interesting to think about. So let's look up Fernie. Oh, okay, we're gonna have to narrow it down. There's lots listed for Fernie. Can you see those?
Nope, not yet.
On the left here?
Oh, on the left there, yeah.
So all of these, I searched for Fernie and it came up with all of these communities that are close to Fernie, I presume. I don't know that area that well. I'm going to search, I'm going to look up Crow's Nest. But if that person...
Yeah, so one of, yeah, well, I think, I can't remember which person it was, but you can always poke around in there on your own and look at the areas in particular that you're interested in.
So that came out, Fernie came up with so many because I guess the school district name was Fernie. So all of these very much smaller communities are coming up under Fernie because they were all part of that particular school district.
Right.
So
it was Coal Creek, apparently. Genevieve, did you see Coal Creek in there?
Let me have a look. Let's go back.
Ooh, number of creeks.
Try again.
Yeah.
Coal Creek. There we go.
Okay, so there is something. Well, that'll be interesting to dig around in there. Look at that. It's always like being a detective. It's so exciting when you get a little something returned.
Oh, and these are big numbers. So here, the number of children of school age in the district, they might be listing for the entire district. I don't know if that usually they only list for that particular school, and the numbers are generally much smaller than that, which I always find really interesting to think about. And it's great when they have extra comments like this. The building is an average wooden structure, furnace heated and satisfactorily equipped. The trustee board is much above the average in rural districts. So some of them, it's also really interesting because some of them will write a lot of information about the population, and they'll talk about different ethnic groups that are living in the area. Sometimes that plays into, or the teacher will speculate that plays into the attendance rate. So they'll talk about that. Sometimes there's a photograph that they attach up in the corner. So definitely, it's one of my favorite collections to poke around with, especially when I've got children that are learning about the place that they're from, or making a connection between historic primary sources and where they live today. Yeah.
Thank you for that. It's 1:32. Can I just show something really quickly on the portal? And then we'll see if there's any specific questions. So you stopped sharing.
I'm not very good at keeping to a time.
No. That was fine. That was great. We came down a little avenue. We got some results. Reading photographs. I just want to show, and I will put some links in there. So can you see that showing up? Learning portal. So I'll put some links, but on the portal there's pathways. That's where you can start looking. And if you look at the pathways, some of them have teach sections. So I'll put some links to the ones that relate to primary sources that have teach sections. And in the teach sections, that's where you'll find if we have any handouts or lesson plans. So this one has a worksheet. So I'll click on it, see if we can have a photo analysis worksheet. So they're usually very short, easy to print off, and you can use those with students. And there's some, you can actually use this one in relation to, is this the video? I'm hoping it's going to go, there's a video. Oh, no, that's another one you can print off and use. Tips for teachers. Oh, that's not the same one. Might be in the watch section. Anyway, if you poke around in these pathways, there's all kinds of resources, but especially the ones that have teach sections. Oh, this is the video I was thinking. So it kind of just leads you through things to look at if you're looking at a photograph with learners, just some things so that you look closer at the photo. And I don't, oh, there is, whoops, I didn't want to play it. There actually is some sound to that one. But just so that you know, and in those sections, it will help you break down some primary sources to if you're
Oh, don't
looking
close
at.
that yet.
Whoop,
Oh,
oh,
okay.
I did.
Okay.
I can go back. Let me go back.
Okay, or I could go. I just wanted to show one more thing from the learning portal.
Sure. Where?
If you go down to look and pull up a photograph.
In this one?
Sure. Let's see if there's
Oh,
one
okay.
there that we can use. I wanted to make sure to show people that. So the learning portal is an amazing resource. And one of the things I wanted to show is how you can link back to the database if you want to get more information about a photograph, or if you want to order a copy. So if you find something through the learning portal or through, for example, the 100 Objects of Interest online exhibit that we have on the museum website, you'll see that down at the bottom there's always a credit. So down there it says credit. BCA stands for BC Archives, so you know that that's one that comes from the archives. And then A-00937 is the code. And what I often do is I'll just copy that straight from there, and I'll copy that number and I'll put it into the database. So if you
dare I click on it, Genevieve? Dare I click on it?
I don't know. Will that work today?
Let's see.
This one apparently is hyperlinked, so we'll see if it works. Oh, look at that!
Yay.
And then it goes straight to the database. Yay! Yeah. That's how it's supposed to work.
Oh, good.
So if for some reason that doesn't happen, you can also put the number into the database the way I showed you the search before. But this is great because then if you found a photograph and you thought, this is really something that I would love to use in my classroom or to have for research purposes, you can order a copy of it from the BC Archives, or you can get more information from going to the website. So that's something good to know. And it's the same with the 100 Objects of Interest. The 100 Objects of Interest, which is an online exhibit that you can access through the museum website, also has a lot of archives material on it. I don't believe any of them are hyperlinked in that same way, but they do have, all of them have the information, the reference codes that you can then put into our database and get more information and look into potentially getting copies if you want copies of any of the material.
Yeah, thank you for that, pointing that out. And I'll pop up some more links there before we end. We have a question though, Genevieve, in the Q&A. Ruth is asking about divorces between married people.
Okay, divorces.
Divorces
are our most requested record type. And those, they're open and you can ask them. We have a whole section on our website about how to ask for divorce records. We don't really have them available for educational purposes, but although there are some, you can easily find older examples in the records. But there is a section on our website about looking up at your own divorce record if you're interested, because we are the repository for all divorce records for all of the province. So people are constant. We get more phone calls about divorce records and more email requests than anything else that we do.
Interesting.
It's a big part of what we do. So I can show you, maybe I'll just quickly share my screen again just to show you where that is on the website. And one thing I wanted to mention as well, oh, now I'll go this way. We talked about what we have. What I think is really, really important is to talk about what we don't have. And that's something that's so important when you're talking about researching communities and families, and to think about where the gaps are. So we do have a lot of records on, for example, the Chinese experience in BC, but it's still significantly less than what we have on the European settler population in BC, for example. And it's really important to encourage students to think about or learners to think about what it is that is missing and why those gaps might exist. Who is creating the record? Why were they creating it? Thinking about, I think in those photographic things that you were, the examples that you were showing, Liz, they talk a lot about that, about thinking about, when we talk about the creator of a photograph, we're talking about the person behind the camera. So why were they taking that picture? Why does the picture look the way it looks? You know, think about the entire context of that photograph in order to get the full story. I will quickly click on, if you click on services on our website. Oh, I thought divorce records was under there, but maybe not. Might be under court records. I apologize. I thought it came up specifically as divorce records, but here we go, divorce orders. So there's lots of information about how to get divorce orders. Let me know if you were asking, if this doesn't answer your question, if you were asking more for educational reasons, or you were curious about that, I'll have a think about how we could make some older examples available for students if there was a reason why you were thinking about that. But if it was out of curiosity for getting them, this is the process for how you can actually get a copy of a divorce order.
Thanks, Genevieve. I just put another link up there, the Heritage Fairs pathway on the Learning Portal and the Teach sections. There's lots of really fantastic resources in there. Couple other questions from Sheila. For the vital records, if there's no JPEG, is there any way of ordering those records? Oh, you did mention that, but do you want to, for genealogy, she's asking in particular. Oh, sorry, I'm mixing up Ruth. Sorry, the divorce question was related to genealogy.
Okay.
And it's a separate question about for the vital records. If there's no JPEG, is there any way of ordering these records?
Right, and then I see somebody asked about adoption records.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
So for vital records, if there's no JPEG, now it's a tough question. What we would normally say is that we require someone to come into the reference room and look it up on the microfilm reel. And we often will suggest that if you don't live in town, that there's ways that you can hire somebody else to come and do that for you and send it to you, or different. But I'm not sure what we're doing at the moment with the situation being so different in terms of as we start heading back into the office. I don't know if there will be more opportunity to phone in and put in an order. All of those are available on the microfilm, so I'm not sure if we'll be starting to make copies of those for researchers. So watch this space, watch our website, and as things start to change, as we return back to work, I'm sure that we'll be making some information about that type of research available. Adoption records, we mostly don't have adoption records. So there are websites that the BC government, where they have information about where adoption records can be found. Occasionally we get really old adoption records that are embedded within other collections of records, but for the most part, modern day, and when I say modern day, I mean anywhere in the last 100 years, adoption records don't come to us because there's another process in government of how they're kept, and because we try not to take in records that we would never be able to make accessible, and those have such strict privacy restrictions, so they're kept in the ministry in which they're created, so that the people who can access them would go through that ministry. The divorce records for genealogy, I should know the answer to this better, but I believe that that divorce records are open, and that if you know who you're researching and you want to access information about the divorce, I believe that you can order that. There is a fee for ordering it, so if you're interested in ordering it, I believe you can. I don't think you need to be one of the people in the divorce, but I would email the address on the website to get more information about that. One of my colleagues will answer you.
And I see in the chat here, Genevieve, one of the attendees works at Vital Statistics and is saying, yeah, if there's no JPEG, you can request. I think that's what she means. If no JPEG, can request for Vital Stats.
Oh, okay. I hadn't heard that before about being able to request it. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So good. You can go to Vital Stats.
Yeah. Now it's 1:44, so we're going to have to close it out. There's another question from Denise, but if you hang on, we can probably answer that question after.
I can answer that really quickly.
Oh,
actually.
do you see it? Excellent.
There was
Thanks, Genevieve.
something that happened where a lot of the images were removed. And I believe that we're working with Vital Stats to rectify that. That's a known problem with the database, and it's certainly not just you that had that happen. There was quite a few that did disappear. So we're working with Vital Stats to make sure that those get back up. I don't know what the timeline for that is, though.
Thanks for clearing that up, Genevieve. Okay, so we've come to the end of our time. I want to thank you so much, Genevieve. I always learn something. You archivists, so much going on there. If you have any follow-up questions, you could email us and we can get back to you. But I think we'll finish up. Oh, but before we go, we do have some more at-home programs that are happening this week. Tomorrow, Wednesday, May 20th, there's an at-home kids in the morning, and there's an at-outside in the afternoon. And on Thursday, there's another at-home. So check the website to see who our guests are this week and what the themes are for this week. So thank you very much. Thanks for joining me, Genevieve, and we'll officially end the program.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
everybody. Thanks for coming.